guys, welcome to my art channel. Thanks for stopping by to make some art with me. For more free art lessons, you could press the button below and subscribe right there on that red button. And I will see you really soon. Now let's get to making some art. Bye-bye. Hi guys, welcome to Mixed Media Art. Today we are going to be doing some weaving and we are going to learn how to do a circular weave and learn a little bit about making our own loom. So the loom is the stationary structure that we put our yarns on to actually make a weaving, and this loom is going to be made out of cardboard. And then I'm going to show you how to do these strings here. These strings are the strings that are stationary and don't move on the loom. They are called the warp threads or the warp yarn. And then we're going to do the actual weaving with the weft threads. Okay, so let me show you what we're going to need. You're going to need some yarn, and you're going to need a piece of cardboard. Something to draw a circle with would be great. If you have an embroidery needle, which is a needle with a really large eye in it, or a nail, you're going to need that to make the circle, a pencil, a really good scissor, watercolor paints, brush, and mortar. And we're ready to get started. To create our loom, I'm going to start by creating my circle, my opening, like this. Now, I have these lids that I got from deli food containers or maybe soup or something, and they're a great size. If you have a roll of masking tape or a small plate, you can use that, or you can just draw your circle freehand and not worry about it. So I'm going to trace this onto my cardboard. And you could do it in pencil. I'm just doing it in ink so you can see it. Like that. Now, it is a little difficult to cut through cardboard. So the trick that I use is I take a nail. If you don't have a nail, but you have a needle with a large eye, like the embroidery needle, and you can go around the entire circle, poking holes into the cardboard. The trick is that you make sure your fingers that are holding the cardboard are not anywhere where you're poking the holes. So if I'm poking a hole here, I'm putting my hand over here. And when you poke, you might have to twist it a little bit. And you're just going to keep going around the entire circle. And it'll take a few minutes, but it makes the process a lot easier, and then you can get you might be able to get your scissor in there depending on the type of scissor you're using. Just watch those fingers. So once you've poked all the way around with your nail, you should hopefully be able to kind of push it out carefully. You might have to either cut a few pieces with your scissor in there or do some extra little poke holes. There we go. Okay, hold on to your cardboard circle. You never know what kind of project you can use it for. And now I have the start of my loom. What I need now are to put holes around my loom so I could put in my warp threads. So the warp threads are the threads that don't move. Those are these threads here. And that holds the whole weaving together. And when you do your warp, when you make your warp, you want an odd number of threads. So to do this, I'm going to You can use a pencil. I would suggest using a pencil to do this because we're going to paint over it. I'm going to do it in marker so you can see it. And I'm just going to make I guess around 11 dots around here, about maybe a pinky's width away from the edge of the circle. Because oops, I just poked through with the marker. But let me see if you could see that. Okay, and I'm going to do 11 of those. I have my dots all the way around. And I'm going to take my nail and I'm going to carefully make holes with those dots. I'm going to poke my nail through. And you want those holes a little bit wider because we're going to have to get yarn or thread through to create the warp threads. And I'm just going to poke each and every one of those and just kind of twist that nail around to make a wider hole. I don't know if you could see that. Probably not. It's a little small. And again, I'm just being super careful not to poke my fingers. Okay, so I have 11 holes and I'm just going to make sure that they're nice and wide. And I drew on this side, so I'm going to make this my front side. And now we're going to have to thread the loom. And I'm going to take a piece of, this is embroidery thread, but you can use yarn. I just want to use something that's different color than the yarn so you'll be able to see it. I'm going to start, I usually measure, when I'm using yarn and thread, I usually do it about no longer than the size of my arm from my middle finger to my shoulder. Otherwise, I find that it tends to get really knotted up. So the trick I use when I'm using thinner, because I'm using embroidery thread, just in case you have the same thing, is I put a piece of Scotch tape on the top and I kind of roll that Scotch tape as tightly as I can, almost like a shoelace. And this way it makes the tip of the thread stiffer and much easier to get through those little holes that I just poked into the cardboard. So I'm going to start from the back and go through my first hole, and I'm going to pull it through all the way to the end, and then I'm going to take that end piece and I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move, just like so. So the way I do this is I go across my circle from the top, I pull it through the bottom, and then when I turn around, I'm going to go to the next hole through the back by just going this way, so it looks like that. Okay, now I'm going to take it from the front and I'm going to go to the hole across like that, and I've made my X. And then I'm just going to go do the same thing. I'm going to go next to the next hole and put it through. So it's like that on the back. And when I come out here, I'm going to try and find the next hole. I did these two, so I'm going to go to this one. Next one over. I'm going to go to the back. I'm going to do this stitch like this. I'm going to go to the front, and I did 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to go into this hole. And I've run short on string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another piece and measure it about the size of my arm. And I'm going to tie it to the string that's left in the back of the loom. I'm going to do a double knot there. I'm going to trim off that excess so you can't see it. I'm going to make a new tip on my thread so I can get it through nice and easy. You do the same to the tip of the yarn. It just makes it so much easier to get through these holes. And then I just cut it into a little point. It's really hard. It would be really hard to see. I wonder if I put it against this purple paper, you could see how I did it. I'm not sure if you could see how I made that point with the tape. And now I'm ready to just continue on. So where was I? I was in the back. I'm going to the next hole over to come through the front. And now I've done all these holes, so I'm going to do this one. And this, sometimes you don't make the holes wide enough, you can just go back and wiggle that nail around, it'll widen the hole. So I'm going to go through the last hole in the back. So when I come through the front of the last hole, I'm going to go across and I'm going to double through a hole that I've already gone through. I'm going to try and go back to my first one over here. And that's the only time I'm going to double back into one of those holes. And what's going to happen is we're going to pull these strings together and you'll have a double string up here. But once I get through the back here, I'm going to tape it down. I'm going to make sure it's tight. I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move, and I can trim that excess off. Now I'm going to take a little piece of this thread that I have left, and I'm going to gather these strings the best that I can in the middle so I can tie them together. And so that string that was kind of awkward is now connected, and I'm just going to trim it really close, and we're going to go over that with the yarn and you won't even see it. So our loom is ready to go. And we are ready to start with our yarn. So I'm just going to clean this little mess up here. And I'm going to start with a piece of yarn about the size of my arm. I might be able to do it twice. Let's see, if it gets really into a lot of knots, then next time I'll only do one, but let's see if we could do it twice. So when you start, I think the starting of your weaving is the hardest part. So once you get going, it's kind of like a rhythm. When you're weaving, it's always like under, over, under, over, under, over. That's how it goes. So you just have to find a place to start. You're going to bring your first yarn through, and you're going to bring it through all the way, and just leave a little tail in the back that you're going to tape down. I should have said in the beginning with materials that you need tape. It's really helpful to have tape. So I'm going to tape the end of my yarn down in the back, and I pull the rest through the front. It's all over the place. And what I'm going to do is, once I get started, I can untape this, so it's not a big deal. It's a little awkward now. It's just getting started. So I'm going to get started by going over my first piece and under my second piece. And I'm going to do a little, I should have just left it shorter, but I'm going to do something here. I'm going to wrap my excess just to make it a little easier. And I'm going to hold on to this that I just wrapped around my hands. So I am under here. I have to go over this one, under this one, and I'm just going to pull it into the center. I'm under, I have to go over and under, and this is the hardest part, just getting started. Figuring out, okay, the last one I did was under the string. Now I have to go over this string, and I'm going to go under this string. And I'm over this string, so I'm going to go under this string. So I'm under here, I have to go over this one, and I'm going to go under this one. And once I get around the first time, it starts to get a little bit easier. Just tie it. And I'm not going to let this string go yet, the one that we taped to the back. I'm going to go a couple times around before I let that loose. So I have to go under and over. And now I'm going to start pushing it into the middle and tightening it a little bit as I go around, under and over. And under. And little by little, it's going to start coming together. And I'm just going to put this down and do a few rounds quickly. I'm going under and over and under. And you could see it's starting to go. It's starting to wrap around. Soon I'll be able to let this string go. So I'm over, I have to go under, over, under. So I'm going to go over this one, under this one, over this one, under this one. And I'm completely, as I go around, I am ignoring this extra thread, this extra piece of yarn is not one of the warp threads. So I am not going under it or over it. I'm just completely ignoring it. And right now I've gone around enough times that I could probably snip it right close to the back. And it's gone, and I can continue to, weaving. So the first couple of rows are definitely the hardest in the circular loom because you have to build up, you have to tighten up these warp threads and get them like spaced out better, and it just takes a couple of rounds. Just make sure as you're going around, you're pushing the threads in together. I'm under, so I want to go over and then under. And I'm going to continue around. You come to the end of your yarn, which I have a long way to go on my yarn because I doubled it. What you're going to do, and I'm going to show you. Say my yarn is about to end here and I want to continue. All I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut it so you can see the different colors. I'm going to take that yarn, I'm going to double knot it. I'm going to pull as tight as I can without breaking it. I'm going to trim that excess yarn off really close, and it'll have a tiny little knot in there. And I'm just going to keep going like it's just one piece. As you continue to go around your loom, you're going to have to sometimes just make sure that your yarn is not popping up on top of each time you go around, and you might have to spread it out a little bit. And you can fill it up as much as you want because you can fill your loom up as much or as little as you want. I'm going to finish it with this string, but you're welcome to continue to fill in the whole entire loom. And I just want to make sure that my ends here, every layer is, sometimes once you start to get the hang of it and go really fast, and you just have to make sure you're not pulling too tightly or it's not hanging too loosely. And I just want to show you how to finish. Now, if you're finishing like I'm finishing, which is kind of in the middle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a couple more steps in there, and I'm going to make this my last step. So I'm going to go underneath, and then I'm going to wrap around. I went over here, and then I'm going underneath my next one. And the one that I go underneath, I'm actually going to wrap my yarn around that and come underneath one more time. And then I'm going to, and that just hold it, and you shouldn't see that. And then I can find a piece of yarn that I can maybe tuck it under in the back. And I could take a little glue and just glue that piece right in the back, because you won't see that, just a little bit, just to make it secure. My weaving is finished. This glue has to just dry a teeny bit. And the next thing we're going to be doing is cutting out the entire cardboard to give it an interesting shape, really rounding out my edges a little bit. Just like that. We can take out our watercolor paints and start painting it. And I'm going to show you how I painted this one. I'm going to just start painting around. I'm going to pick a couple of colors. And I'm going to try and, maybe pick up some colors that I see in the yarn. I have a lot of pink and red and green. I have a lot of colors in there. So maybe I'll start with a green. And I'm just going to paint around it. With my watercolors, and I'm actually going right over these threads that are on top of the cardboard. And I'm going to do a couple layers because it's watercolor, and the initial layers are going to pretty much sink into the cardboard. So if you want them to be brighter or bolder, you're going to have to do a couple layers. So I'm going to do this layer, and I'm going to let it dry a little bit, and then do another layer over it. And to blend my colors, I'm just putting my next layer on top of my first layer, at the edge of my first layer. And if I add a little bit of water around it, those colors are just going to kind of bleed in together like that. See? And that's the effect that I want. I want it to look just kind of like they're blending in to one another. And just add my last color, and you can use, of course, as many colors or whatever colors that you like. And certainly you could do this with watercolors or tempers, whatever type of paint you have. Here you have your finished circular weaving. Just let it dry before picking it up like I did, and it's really an interesting piece of art. I hope you enjoyed making this, and I will see you again really soon. Bye-bye.